Very good morning to all of you. Today we will study about the part 2 of the good governance. In the last class that we have studied about, so let's have a recap that about the last class what we have studied about the good governance. The good governance is as a predominant view. The good governance is an externally dictated terms that we have studied in the context of World Bank view, as well as that IMF view with respect to good governance. How this value-laden term it was promoted during the 1980s and the 90s through the terms of the aid conditionalities. So good governance sets an agenda for the countries with respect to their political, administrative, as well as the financial policy making. It leads into the number of reforms. It led into widening of the public administration. It led into the democracy more participative. It led into the greater role being played by the government agencies as well as the government system. In the last few decades, there was shift in the concept from the government to the governance, that and when the incumbent government which focused on maximum governance and the minimum government. So under this backdrop, today we will going to understand that the second administrative reforms commission, how the commission in its report try to highlight, make this process of the governance more and more people centric. That is something called citizen centric administration. It highlighted the number of attributes that should be there, that should be adhered, so that it can turn the good governance into a citizen centric administration. The governance, in order to be citizen centric, it should be participative and transparent. It should be effective, efficient, responsive to the citizens. It should be accountable to the people. So these aspects we will take up one by one in today's class. Before to start that, let's begin with the concept that is called the governance. What do you mean by the governance? Keep in the back of mind, governance is something that which is a shared activity. Governance is something which is a participative approach. Governance is something where that both the state as well as non-state actors participate for the welfare of the society. They promote the goal of a welfare state. The state play a very crucial role, but at the same time that it should be associative, it should be participative, it should be more democratic, where the significant role being played by state, non-state, profit, non-profit organizations. The functioning of the institution of the governance will have to be objectively focused on the satisfaction of the peoples. They should focus on the public service delivery. And on the other hand, the government which focused on the formal activities, which more and more focus on rule based. Okay, so sometimes colloquially it is said that it is the governance which can be conceived without the form of the government. So governance is possible even without the government. But in the context of the countries like India or many of the developing countries, the government plays a very significant role, and even the new public service approach, all they've been highlighted, there should be a coexistence between the government as well as the people. A symbiotic culture that gives rise to a win-win solution to the unexpected demand of the citizens from the government, and that nurture a kind of the character, a kind of the environment where that everything activity would be inclusive. That is the basically approach of new public service approach, which is a predominant theory of with respect to the public administration nowadays. So the good governance that providing an opening up a vista for a kind of shift in the governmental approach. Now let us try to understand that what Administrative Reforms Commission it said, what are the previous initiatives that try to accrue the government system into a governance system. Okay, so let's begin with a simple outline. According to Second Administrative Reform Commission, all of you know the Second Administrative Reform Commission. According to Second Administrative Reforms Commission, that highlighted there should be that 8 attributes which can link the edifice of the good governance into a citizen-centric administration. So what are the 8 attributes? They are the 8 attributes that this structure of the good governance should be premised over accountability, transparency, responsive, equitable and inclusive, effective and efficient, rule of law, participatory and consensus oriented. Okay, dear friends, you need not have to panic, because in public administration you have to study in the detail about all the things. But for the time and exam point of view, focus on that. There are 8 attributes which have been highlighted by the second ARC, which try to link the concept of good governance into a citizen-centric administration. Good governance, it is a value-laden term which focused on collective activities and collect towards shared goals. Okay, and that activity, it should be focused for the welfare of citizens. Citizens would be the core of the entire governance process. Then that we will see that how in the Citizens Charter the good citizens are considered to be the king, and that's and the entire system of the government, it should be for the service of the citizens. So appreciate that we're going to realize the one of the principle of the directive principle of state's policy that connoted the India as a welfare state. Now these are the 8 attributes you can remember: accountability, transparency, responsive, equitable and inclusive, effective and efficient, rule of law, participatory and consensus oriented. Okay, so these are the good governance. Now, to what extent these government of India had taken initiatives in the past to transform the system of the government into a governance system? Let us see what are the initiatives taken in the past. So now let's see the past initiatives taken by the government of India to transform the system and to bring the system into a good governance system. Okay, so the pehla initiative tha, the first initiative was based on the report of Santhanam Committee. Okay, that in the 1964, on the basis of recommendation of this committee, it is also known as the Committee of Prevention of Corruption. Okay, what is this? The Committee of Prevention of Corruption. So the Prevention of Corruption Committee, which is popularly known as the Santhanam Committee. So on the basis of recommendation of this committee, that in the 1964 that Chief Vigilance Commission was the set up. Okay, and this Chief Vigilance Commission, it was given a statutory status. It was given the statutory status in 2003. Okay, you note it. इसको याद रखना है. When the CVC, Chief Vigilance Commission, was given statutory status, it was 2003. Now, statutory, everybody know statutory पता है that any body which is created by a statute or law of parliament. Okay, I have already discussed it in the previous lecture, but there are the types of body, for example, constitutional, statutory, non-statutory, extra constitutional. So all things I hope all of you have remembered, but still constitutional means the body which is directly created by an articles of a constitution or directly under the provisions of constitution. Okay, like Election Commission of India, Union Public Service Commission, Finance Commission, all these are what? Constitutional body. Similarly, there are certain bodies which are created by an statute, act or law of parliament. Okay, law of legislature. Those are called statutory body. So and so, the Chief Vigilance Commission, it was given statutory status in 2003. Now, from the exam point of view, that the purpose and functioning of the Chief Vigilance Commission, it is the most important. Okay, so what are the functions of Chief Vigilance Commission? You should know. So functions of Chief Vigilance Commission, that first function is advisory. Okay, it advises the central government with respect to matters related to maintenance of integrity of administration. Okay. Second function, it is the superintendence over the Chief Central Bureau of Investigation. It is the principal investigating agency of central government. You know it, against anti-corruption activity. Okay, anti-corruption, that is Central Bureau of Investigation. So who supervise and who exercise the superintendence over the functioning of the Central Bureau of Investigation? It is the Chief Vigilance Commission. Okay, and last year it was in news due to certain cases relating to this, so you add it in the current affairs part. Okay. Third function, it also undertakes various vigilance administration over various ministries as well as the certain government other organizations. So from exam point of view, that you should know that Chief Vigilance Commission, okay, then it is a statutory body, and then most important, the functions of this body, that is it advises to the central government with respect to all the matter relating to corruption, that is something called integrity of administration. Second, that it keeps supervision and control over the functioning of Central Bureau of Investigation. Third function, very vigilance administration over various other organizations and various other ministries. Okay, so ये initiative था, it was a initiative to bring system more and more transparent, more and more corruption free, more and more objective, okay, more and more rational. So this was the initiative taken in 1964. After the CBC, the significant initiative, significant reform was, so second thing was Lokpal and Lokayuktas. That you know that on the basis of recommendation of the first Administrative Reform Commission, okay, first ARC, what was the recommendation? That it recommended to set up a Lokpal. Okay, the first ARC recommended to set up a Lokpal. What is this Lokpal? Lokpal to act as a watchdog over the integrity over the ministers as well as member of parliament. And what is this Lokpal? To act as what? Watchdog over the integrity of ministers plus member of parliaments. Okay, so and on the basis of the recommendations, number of state government who they set up their Lokayuktas. So in the state government, at the state level, it is the Lokayuktas. So Lokpal bill was there, you know it, and on the basis of recommendation of first ARC, Lokpal was set up. It acts as a watchdog over the integrity of the ministers and members of parliament. State government set up the Lokayuktas in their respective states. Okay, so Lokayuktas, you note it because you know the function of the Lokayuktas. Lokayukta का क्या function होता है? To investigate allegations against the public officials, the political and the bureaucratic executives. ठीक है, ये सारे terms I hope all of you know what is political executive and bureaucratic executive. But dear friends, since we have the constraint with the time, we will discuss all these in the comprehensive lecture series of public administration if it is possible. Otherwise, for the exam point of view, remember all these terminologies. That Lokayuktas to investigate with respect to the matters of public officials and executives. Okay, Lokayuktas also have the suo motu power. एक term पढ़े होंगे, suo motu power. What do you mean by suo motu power? Suo motu power basically refers to the authority of the institution or the body to start the investigating function by on its own initiative. मतलब कोई अपने knowledge में खुद initiate करे कोई case का investigation, उसको suo motu power कहते हैं. For example, like we have the judiciary, like Supreme Court have suo motu power. अपने initiative से कुछ काम कर सकता है. Same so and so Lokayuktas and Lokpal. Okay, Lokayuktas, they have also suo motu power with respect to what? इंटेग्रिटी ऑफ द मिनिस्टर्स, पब्लिक ऑफिशियल्स, यदि कोई केसेस हैं तो उनके लिए ये इनिशिएटिव ले सकता है। ठीक है, तो इसका पर्पस भी क्या था? ऑल्सो टू क्लीन द सिस्टम। ठीक है, टू मेक इट मोर एंड मोर ऑब्जेक्टिव, मोर एंड मोर transparent, more and more service oriented. Getting my point? Now, similarly, there is a very significant initiative taken by the government of India, that was Citizen Charter. So third initiative, you know, what was that? It was Citizen Charter. Citizens Charter. Citizen Charter, you must have visited the banking institutions or many of the government officials. You must have seen and noticed in the walls when you enter that there is a board that is called Citizen Charter. It basically talks about the services being provided by institutions. So it's for the citizen. It is for the empowerment of the citizens. So it was a very good initiative, a very important initiative taken. So now let us understand Citizen Charter a little bit. Being a member or being a citizen in a democratic country, you should know about the Citizen Charter. Because exam point of view से क्या याद रखना है? What is the principle on which the Citizen Charter is based? This is the most important point. You should know it. So Citizen Charter is based on the principle that is the king is the citizen and government organization exist not to rule but to serve the citizens. What is the principle? You note it. So this is the principle. You remember, Citizen Charter is based on the premise that king is the citizen. Who is the king? It is the citizen. An entire government system or government organization exists not to rule but to serve the citizens. Okay, you know it. Citizen Charter किस principle पे based है कि who is the king? It is the citizen. And the service of the citizen, it is the function of the government. Now, there are many issues with respect to Citizen Charter because Citizen Charter itself is a bigger topic. But you should remember 2 points. Number 1, it's a principle, and number 2, Indian version. What is the model of Citizen Charter? It is the Sevottam model. It is an assessment improvement model. Okay, because it is called the Indian version of Citizen Charter. Okay, there are many loopholes, limitations with respect to not proper implementation of this Citizen Charter initiative. In the mains part, if the time permit, we will take up, but for the time being, you remember 2 points. Principle, citizens is the king. Second, in the Sevottam model, it is the Indian model for Citizen Charter. Okay. Third initiative, and that is the most significant, that is e-governance initiative taken. Next initiative is the e-governance. Okay, let's see. So now let's see, friend, the e-governance. That you know that e-governance means that the information and the communication technology, ICT in short, which has, you know that it has transformed the entire process of the governance. Okay, because the information and communication technology, it had the potential to elevate this governance process to a new levels. Okay, you know that in the previous decade or in the last few decades, the demand of the citizen from the government, it has increased manifold. There is a huge unexpected demand from the citizen side to the government. Now the government is bound to oblige to those demands. It is the government is duty bound to provide the service. But the major question started, how they do the efficient and effective management of the service delivery. Here, this e-governance, that is your ICT, it's a promising solution. Okay, so under this backdrop of unexpected demand, government has to be accountable. Government has to be service-wise duty bound. So this ICT comes with a promising solution, because this ICT, it facilitates in the efficient storing and the retrieval of the data. Because you know that how you manage the service, it's efficient management of the data and information. Data and information empower the government to take the expeditious and judicious decision making, faster decision making, efficient decision making, and then it enables the government to do the better service delivery. It enables the B2B service, business to business service, that is government to citizen service, that is government to business service. All these kind of the service is basically facilitated by information and communication technology. So it is the huge potential. Now, in public administration, there is a theory that is something called the bounded rationality and unbounded rationality. Bounded rationality and unbounded rationality. Dear friends, those who are students of the public administration, they must have read about the concept of bounded and unbounded rationality. But those who are not, do not bother about that. I am trying to give the gist about that. Okay, the bounded rationality, here it talks about that the system has a limited capacity. Okay, the system has the limited capacity. So and so the management as well as human resources has limited capacity. It was propounded by Herbert Simon, one of the public administrative thinker. Herbert Simon say that human being has limited capacity because the capacity is always limited, because if it becomes unlimited, मतलब you cannot access every possible in data. Okay, data के हर एक aspect को you cannot realize that, you cannot process that, because there should be the n number of the permutations and combinations for a given set of the data. So and so there is a huge number of the data and information in the world. You cannot process every data. You cannot turn every data into information. You cannot turn every information into a decision making, because for perfect decision making you have to access every bit of the data, which is not possible for a human being. But in the later course of the time, there was another thinker, that is Wydror. Okay, he was another public administrative thinker. He said that with the advance of the science and technology, as well as particularly information and communication technology, it has enhanced the capacity of the system to a level that you can process almost every data. You can process almost every possible data to the extent it makes you a perfect. So it says that it is possible now with the advance of science and technology that you can process a huge number of data. Huge number, it means you can even process infinite number of the data, and this infinite capacity makes you to make a faster decision making. So that is why it is said that it is the ICT which basically transform the concept from bounded rationality to unbounded rationality. And due to this unbounded rationality, now the government become more and more capable to do a better service delivery. Government become better capable to take the efficient decisions. The government now become more and more capable to take the better policy framing with an empowered decision and informative decisions. That's why it has increased the capacity of the government. Okay, it has ultimately what it says, that ICT has increased the capacity of the government. Okay, increase the capacity of the government. Hopefully all of you are getting, because let's trying to cite an example. Okay, that this entire world is facing today the global pandemic of, that is COVID-19. Today you are witnessing in and around, there is a huge demand from the citizen to the government. The government trying to fulfill and government trying to match with the demands. Okay, consider it how huge it is, how huge this task it is. So this task, if the government, if not capable, how this task can be achieved? Government have to be capable. So here the government is taking every resort through the digital platform for, let's say, direct benefit transfer. Government is utilizing the, let's say, the online payment system for the direct payment. The government is trying to e-commerce initiatives. Okay, the government is trying to push up that what is called digital platform, digital education system, digital platform. Matlab, now that you know that with the push of a button you are now linked to the entire globe. So this is the potential of ICT that makes you enable so empowered. So, and how? Second thing, in this backdrop of COVID-19, it is not only the government, but it is the private players as well. They are playing the crucial roles as well. It is the NGOs, they are also playing the crucial role. It is the other interest group, they are also playing the crucial role. It is the women organizations. These are the every part and parcel of the society are now making effort to provide the goods and services to the society. This is an example of good governance. Okay, let's transform it. So now let's move on, try to understand. So it is the e-governance that has basically taken the capacity of the government to a level which is transformative. Now you note here that e-governance to increase the reach, e-governance to increase the reach of government, what? Both geographically and demographically. Both geographically as well as demographically. Okay, two terms you should remember. Now we have understood the significance of the e-governance little bit, but let's see some of the episodic development of e-governance in India. So the first initiative, it was the Department of Electronics. Because Government of India had understood the significance of this technology, so the Department of Electronics was recognized and it was established as a separate department in 1970s. Then it was followed by the establishment of National Informatics Center, that is NIC, in the 1977. ये dates याद रखेंगे, these are important from the exam point of view. So Department of Electronics was set up in 1970, followed by the National Informatics Centers in the 1977. So with respect to the governance initiative, so it was the NICNet, you note it. It is the NICNet that was started in 1987. 87 में क्या start किया गया? That is NICNet. Okay. And what is this NICNet? Was basically, यहाँ पर एक term याद रखेंगे. It is the National Satellite Based Computer Network. What is this? National Satellite Based Computer Network. ठीक है? 1987. So ये initiative लिया गया. Now then it was followed by DISNIC. ठीक है? NICNet was followed by DISNIC. What is this DISNIC? This is District Information System of NIC. District Information System of National Informatics Center. Okay, so these are the developments. Department of Electronics 1970, then NIC, National Informatics Center 1977, 87 it was NICNet, then it was DISNIC, then ultimately all these results into 2006, that is NEGP program, NEGP, National E-Governance Program. Okay, this is National E-Governance Program. ठीक है, ये सब dates याद रखेंगे because questions can directly be asked, because it's a very hot topic always and it's a potential area from exam point of view. So now let's move the next development that had been undertaken in the context of Government of India, and that is the computerized grievance redressal mechanism. So this is known as the CP grams in short. ये important है, exam के लिए आप याद रखेंगे. It is basically a computerized grievance redressal based mechanism. The CP gram, it was developed by DARPG. इसको याद रखेंगे आप लोग. This was developed by short में it is pronounced as DARPG, means Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. Okay, what is this? Department of Administrative Reform, Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances. public grievances. So it was developed by CP-Gram, was developed by DARPG along with the National Informatics Center in 2001. Okay, so computerized based grievance redressal mechanism, it means the redressal of the grievances. Okay, yeah, because the two-way communication should be there, it will ensure the more and more transparency. Now the further developments were taken, and next significant and landmark piece of legislation was Right to Information Act 2005. Right to Information Act, it was legislated in 2005. Right to Information Act, it provided the people with right to know. Okay, right to know. Aims to empower the people to ask questions, to ask about information. Okay, so it was a landmark piece of legislation. The purpose is to strengthen this participatory democracy, okay, and ushering the people in people-centric administration. Because right to information, ये objective क्या था इसका? To make the citizen an empowered citizen. They can ask government with respect to information, with respect to the public policies and actions. Okay, so it means information is very crucial for the development. Earlier, the work of the government, sometimes it was marked with secrecy. Okay? Even the Official Secrets Act, it was the act under which the government functions. But it was Right to Information Act, it tried to bring in transparency. Transparency because the government have to be accountable with their policies with respect to the information, and they would be accountable to the citizens. The citizens, they are now enabled and capable enough to know about the policies, actions, decisions taken by the government with their elected government, and they can whether those decisions were for their welfare or not. So it will try to create an empowered citizenry in India. Okay, so Right to Information Act, it tried to bring transparency into the system. Transparency in the government system makes them more objective, okay, make them more predictable, and also enables the citizen to participate in the governance process effectively. What is this? That in a democracy, it is said that it is based on the circular flow of information. Okay, democracy is based on in a circular flow of information. What is the circular flow? Let's understand. The citizens, through the process of election, they elect their government. The government makes the policies, plans for the development of the citizen, for the welfare of the citizen. So the government takes the decisions based on informations. The checks and balances of the government is by the citizens. But how they keep? The government, they should also know about what is happening in the government. Then and then they keep checks and balances. So that government to citizens in the form of the policies, in the form of the actions, in the form of acts, the informations are channelized. And by due process of the election, the citizens that elect their representatives, and those representatives constitute government and they runs the system. So this circular flow of information, if it is exchanged, then it makes the system more empowering, more transparent, and more objective. This is the objective of Right to Information Act. Okay, if it is implemented in the letter and spirit, then it results into strengthening and empowering of the system. So in the fundamental sense, we can call it that if it is a good governance, then right to information is a necessity. Because what is this good governance? That it is a shared approach. It is a collective activity. It is a shared acts. So for the shared act, the citizens and government should be equal in terms of knowledge, equal in terms of information, equal in terms of capacity, equal in terms that citizens should know that they are the masters. The entire democracy is based on the principle of the popular sovereignty. But even the people do not know, citizens do not know about the power, then they cannot keep checks and balance to the government. Okay, so right to information brings in more and more democratizing the system. Okay, so dear friend, with respect to the Right to Information Act 2005, क्या क्या याद रखने हैं एग्जाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से? नंबर 1, dates when it was enacted. Number 2, it empowered the citizens with what? Right to know. Right to know. You must know it. Right to know. Right to empower. Right to know. And second thing, there are certain sections. Okay. Somebody who are interested, please go through the Right to Information. That is the first report on the second ARC. The entire report is based on the Right to Information. You can easily, freely download from the internet. If you have the time, read the report. It will better realize it. If you do not read the entire report, at least read the synopsis. Okay. Now, come back to our topic on our discussion. That we are studying the good governance. That in the edifice of the good governance, that in the first lecture we have understood the dimensions with respect to the governance versus the government. So in the governance, what was the more important point? It is the collective things. Okay, and what is here? It is the formalism. The collective things means the number of stakeholders. Stakeholders means both the government plus private plus NGOs plus the interest groups plus the pressure groups plus women organizations. Matlab, there are a number of the interest group, pressure group, profit, non-profit organization. They work for the delivery of the goods and services, and that work for the welfare of the citizens. So this is the collective activity. That is the main premise, edifice of the governance. This governance was a liberal concept, but the predominant view, it is an externally added and dictated term by the World Bank. The World Bank view was economical plus the instrumental in the character. They defined how they crystallize the concept of the good governance. They say that the good governance, because it is the first word, it is the aid conditionality which sets the agenda of the governance for the country, and that is promoted through the concept of the good governance. And the good governance means for them, it is the sound developmental management, means the economic and social resources of the country should be utilized in a way that the economical system should be what? Predictable. It should be viable. It should be, and thereby there should be the changes in their economic policies, in the political regime, political policies, in terms of their administrative policy. So there should be reforms, and all those reforms sets an agenda so that system to be viable, and that is the main concept of the good governance dictated by the World Bank. But dear friends, the conceptualization which was economical in the character, it was criticized by other groups, other school of thoughts. So one of the examples, it was given by the D. Bandyopadhyay. Okay, D. Bandyopadhyay. So the Bandyopadhyay say that even the good governance concept of the World Bank, it was a new form of the colonialism. In the globalized world, it is a new form of the colonialism. So friends, we are not entering into the criticism part, because the criticism part, it enters into the domain of the mains. Okay, whether for the Union Public Service Commission or the JPSC, it's become the part of the mains. So till this point you should remember for your prelims and as well as for the other part of the exam. Now it's an accepted view, but it has the criticism. Okay. On the other hand, the government, which is based on the principle of formalism. So there was a shift in approach from government to governance, and that what is the emphasis of present government? That is minimum government and maximum government. Minimum government and maximum governance. Okay. So it's a focus on collective things. Now, Today we have studied about the other aspect with respect to this. Second Administrative Reform Commission say something about the good governance. It had highlighted about 8 attributes which can link it to the citizen-centric administration. Okay, we have studied about all those aspects. I humble request, please remember all those, because it's a new as well as conceptual topic. It helps you to conceptualize it. Then we have studied about the various initiatives part taken by the government of India to convert the system from the government to more and more governance based. What were the initiatives? To assert transparency, to check the corruption, it was the Chief Vigilance Commission was set up, okay, based on the Santhanam Committee report. Then we have the Citizen Charter Initiative, for that which based on principle of the king is the citizen. Third, it was the e-governance initiative, that is ultimately NGP programs. The Citizen Charter इंडिया में कौन सा मॉडल है, that is the सेवोत्तम, ये याद रखेंगे आप लोग. Then after that, Right to Information Act, that 2005, with an objective to empower the citizen with the right to know. They can participate in decision making. They ask their government with respect to the policies, actions, and all the helps to empower them. All the helps to enable them so they can also participate in the due process of the governance. Okay, so it is a democracy which calls for the participation of the citizens in the decision making. The citizens in decision making. But how the citizens can participate in decision making unless and until they should be empowered? So it is the Right to Information Act, one of the steps towards the good governance, and that enables the people to be empower them so that they can also participate in decision making and so in the due process of the governance. Okay, so with these points we are trying to conclude our today's class. Dear friends, with respect to the public administration, we are trying our best so that make some crispy and some of the comprehensive lectures, because public administration is a wide topic. Hopefully all of you are now realizing after going through a single topic. Okay, but we are trying our best so that it would be helpful to all of you to prepare for the exams. Okay, for such videos, be in touch with the channel, subscribe it if you are the new, and promote it, dear friends, because it will also help to same kind of other aspirants who are also preparing for. It's an online platform. Subscribe it and share it. So revise it. And last but not the least, we are also make some videos on MCQ section, that is Prachand Abhyas session on the good governance, and all the lectures we are taking simultaneously. But if the time would not permit, but still I humble request, please go through the Prachand Abhyas session, because there will get the good and quality questions, revise it and integrate with the conceptual part. All of you are now studying and taking care about your family. So take care. Have a good day. Goodbye.